You're not supposed to be here. But here you are, barefoot, disoriented, wrapped in linen that scratches like regret. The air smells of wet dust, roasted lentils, and something vaguely metallic, like the taste of blood you sometimes remember from your childhood nosebleeds. Congratulations. You've just woken up in Mohenjo-Daro, circa 2600 BCE. There's no electricity, of course. No buzzing screens. No notifications. No milk latte waiting on your nightstand. Just the sun, rising heavy and ancient, spilling gold over clay rooftops and casting long shadows that stretch like forgotten prayers across the narrow lanes of the city. And you're lying on one of those rooftops, flat, sun-baked, cracked by centuries of history. The stone beneath your back is still warm from yesterday. You're blinking at the sky, which looks almost modern in its blueness until you realize there are no jet trails, no satellites blinking like dying stars. It's quiet, unnervingly quiet, not the kind of quiet you crave after a long day. No, this is the before sound kind of silence. The type that feels like the world is holding its breath. You sit up. Your joints creak like dry bamboo, and your muscles protest the same way your spine does after a bad night on a futon mattress. You're not wearing shoes. That's not a mistake. In this city, you walk like everyone else. Feet bare, toes caked in dust, because leather is scarce and respect is measured in silence, not fashion. You glance around. The houses are low and square, made of sun-dried bricks stacked in perfection that would make your IKEA bookshelf weep with shame. There are no windows, just openings like missing teeth in the walls. The streets are narrow and eerily clean. Too clean, like someone scrubbed the past out of them. You sniff the air again. Ash, river silt, and something bitter. Maybe fermented chickpeas, maybe decay. It's hard to tell. Your senses are still adjusting. The city feels familiar in a way that stings. Like deja vu with teeth. A woman passes by below, balancing a clay jar on her head like it's part of her spine. Her skin glows bronze in the early light. She doesn't look up. No one does. This is a city built on eyes that mind their own business. You climb down a crude ladder made of twisted rope and wood. Your fingers slip once, and for a moment, you panic until your feet hit the ground and the city reclaims you. This isn't some jungle outpost or tribal camp. It's a metropolis. A Bronze Age metropolis with drainage systems more advanced than the plumbing in half of modern New York. The streets are grid. The homes have bathrooms. The water flows with a purpose. It's unnerving. Because here's the thing. There are no kings. No monuments. No temples. No war. Just people. Lots of them. Living. Quietly. Efficiently. Almost like they were trying not to be remembered. Your feet carry you down the main avenue, past rows of identical homes with flat roofs and wide doorways. You catch glimpses inside. A woman grinding grain, a child stacking pebbles into shapes, a man adjusting a small oil lamp. No one speaks. Words here are currency, and silence is wealth. A cart rolls by, pulled by a bull with eyes like tired gods. Its wheels creak, the only sound in a world that seems to have turned its volume all the way down. You're starting to sweat. The sun is higher now, and the city bakes under it like a forgotten offering. You smell cumin, dust, maybe sweat, maybe yours, maybe the city's. It's hard to tell where your body ends and the past begins. Your throat is dry. You haven't brushed your teeth because, well, toothbrushes don't exist yet. But someone hands you a small clay cup filled with something green and herbal. You drink without asking. It tastes like mint, ashes, and possibly regret. But it works. You swallow the past. Welcome to Mohenjo-Daro, a city that was carved by hands you'll never know. A civilization that built in silence, thrived in symmetry, and disappeared without a scream. This is not the Rome you studied, not the Egypt of gold masks and pyramids. This is something older, quieter, stranger, and you're in it now. You look down at your hands. Dust clings to your palms like guilt. The silence presses against your chest. Something about this place feels wrong. Not evil, not dangerous, just too perfect. You don't know it yet, but you're standing on a graveyard. One without tombstones. One where the dead never cried out. And soon, you'll start to wonder why. But for now, the sun is rising, and your story has only just begun. You think you're just walking, but you're not. With every step, you're trampling over ghosts. Not metaphorical ones. No, these are literal, buried beneath your feet, compacted into silence by millennia of mud and memory, is a city that once breathed, bathed, and broke bread exactly where you're standing. The dust clinging to your ankles? That's not just dirt. It's history pulverized. The street you're walking down feels familiar. It's laid out in a perfect line, straight as a ruler. Though, of course, no one's invented those yet. The buildings on either side are cautious, not ostentatious. Nothing here screams, "Look at me." Instead, everything murmurs, "I was useful." This wasn't a city built to impress the gods. It was built to work. You pause near a wall, its bricks worn smooth by time and touch. You run your hand across the surface. It's warm from the sun, but cool beneath, like touching someone's back while they sleep. You think, maybe if you press hard enough, you'll feel the heartbeat of the city. Spoiler, you don't. Because Mohenjo-Daro no longer breathes. But once did. And not in the grandiloquent way of empires obsessed with pyramids or ziggurats or statues 10 stories tall. Mohenjo-Daro's pulse was quiet, even bureaucratic. Its lifeblood was in the routine, in water jars being filled, in traders haggling over beads, in the sound of wet cloth being slapped against stone at the washing platforms. The city never wanted a crown. It wanted order. You step into what was once a home. No one stops you. There are no doors, just thresholds. The walls are built of the same meticulous bricks, the same rhythmic silence. A raised platform in one corner might have been a bed, or a prayer space, or both. You can't tell. You try to imagine a life lived here. A child dragging their fingers across this same wall. A mother crouched at a hearth, grinding chickpeas. A father tracing maps in the dust with a stick, dreaming of trade routes down the Indus. But all you see are shadows. The floor beneath you is uneven, not because it's eroded, but because people once walked here, left marks, wore it down with footsteps like yours. Only theirs didn't come from curiosity. Theirs came from life, daily, repetitive, sacred in its monotony. You exit and find yourself in a narrow lane between homes. It's shady here, cooler. The air smells of turmeric and clay. Insects buzz somewhere just out of sight, as if rehearsing a song that no one will ever hear. You step on something soft. It's a piece of fabric, fossilized by sun and time. Maybe once it was a shawl. Maybe it belonged to a girl named Leia or Priam, whose name was never written down because this city didn't do names. Not in the way you understand them. No alphabets carved into monuments. No heroic deeds sung into eternity. Just things left behind, waiting for someone like you to notice. You kneel and pick it up. The cloth disintegrates in your hand. Welcome to the archaeology of silence. You keep moving. The houses look the same. That's not an accident. Mohenjo-Daro was planned with terrifying precision. Every street aligned to catch the breeze, to resist floods, to make sure everyone had access to water. It's a city without chaos. And that, in itself, is unsettling. Because humans are messy, loud, petty. We build monuments to ego. We inscribe our names where no one asked for them. But here, none of that. Here, The people designed for equality, for simplicity, for something that looks suspiciously like contentment. And that's the part that keeps nagging at you. Where are the tyrants? Where's the chaos? Where's the conflict? You don't know it yet, but this city is whispering a warning. Not in blood, not in ruins, but in its perfection. Because what kind of civilization builds this well, lives this peacefully, and then disappears without a trace? Without a war, without a graveyard, without a scream? You feel a chill, even in the sun. The wind shifts, and for a moment, you swear you hear footsteps behind you. You turn. Nothing. Just bricks. Just dust. Just the echo of a city that once believed it could outsmart history. And for a while, it did. You keep walking, and the deeper you go, the more the silence changes shape. It stops feeling empty and starts feeling deliberate, like someone vacuumed the noise out of the city and replaced it with intention. There are no banners here, no marble statues of heroic leaders with one arm forever raised to the sky, no towering temples echoing with divine threats or incense-thick sermons. And yet, the city runs like clockwork. If you're expecting a throne room, you won't find one. If you're looking for a royal palace, you might as well stop now. The ruler of Mohenjo-Daro, if such a person even existed, left no golden seal, no marble bust, no legacy carved in stone. Instead, they left drainage systems and straight lines. In a city that functioned so efficiently, it makes your modern bureaucracies look like children playing house. You pause an intersection. The streets stretch out in neat angles, paved in a rhythm so precise it feels like the city was laid out by a divine mathematician with obsessive-compulsive tendencies. Everything is measured, balanced, unemotional. It's unnerving. Where's the chaos? Where's the ego? Where's the human mess? Civilizations are usually loud about their power. Think of Rome, all blood and glory and marble veins. Think of Babylon, with its ziggurats clawing at the heavens. Think of Egypt, where even the sand brags about whose bones it holds. But not here. Here, the only monument is efficiency. You pass another house. The interior is modest, but symmetrical, clean, compartmentalized, humble. You step into what might be a courtyard. There's a central platform, raised, square, sunlit. Not for worship, not for speeches, just space. And again, no names. No signs that say, this house belonged to great architect Naram III. No inscriptions claiming, in this room, the high priest of bathing invented soap. Nothing, just silence, and stone, and a sense that everyone knew their role, so no one had to shout about it. You start to suspect something. A strange, absurd thought. What if this was a civilization that didn't need a king? It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? And yet there are no palaces, no royal tombs, no murals glorifying a divine ruler with 400 concubines and a love for war elephants. Instead, there's equality. The rich lived slightly higher, perhaps on raised plinths, but their homes weren't mansions. They had better drains, slightly larger courtyards, but no golden gates, no carved lions at the door. Just more of the same, brick. And that's what gets to you. Because if this city didn't build itself on fear or faith, then what held it together? Could it be trust? A shared agreement, quiet and unwritten, that life worked better when everyone followed the same flow? Like a murmuration of birds, shifting midair in perfect choreography without a single leader. The thought is almost romantic. And then you remember, they're all gone. So maybe it didn't work after all. You reach what might have been a civic center. There are no pillars, no flags, just an open space surrounded by evenly spaced rooms. Some say this was the seat of administration. Others think it was a granary. Honestly, it could have been both. Here, Form follows function, and function follows nothing, apparently. No scriptures, no manifestos, just silence and structure. You're beginning to see the pattern. In Mohenjo-Daro, control wasn't shouted from rooftops. It was etched into the bricks. The city itself was the authority. It told you where to walk, how to bathe, where to dispose of waste, and where to store your grain. It whispered in right angles and water channels. This is how we live. This is what works. Don't ask questions. You lean against a wall. The stone is cool, unyielding. You can almost hear the city's voice, buried deep beneath layers of silt and silence. We didn't need gods to behave. We had order. But then you ask the dangerous question. And when the order broke, who was there to save them? The answer, of course, is no one. No gods. No kings. No heroes carved in stone. Just silence. And dust. And you, trying to make sense of it all, thousands of years too late. You're still adjusting to the smell of the air, to the rhythm of footsteps on sun-baked stone, to the eerie sense that this city doesn't just function, it breathes without noise, without spectacle, like a well-oiled ghost. And now it's morning. Not the kind of morning, you know, where breakfast is rushed and half your brain is still trying to find Wi-Fi. Here, the body wakes first. Not with coffee, but with ritual. Because in Mohenjo-Daro, you bathe before you eat. Always. This isn't optional. This isn't cultural. This is law, though no one wrote it down. So, you walk toward the heart of the city. The Great Bath. It sits like a sunken secret among the high walls and open courtyards, surrounded by silence, so thick it feels ceremonial. No gods stand guard. No priests wave incense. And yet, the space hums with purpose. You descend the steps slowly, barefoot, because sandals are not permitted here. You're not even sure who decided that, but the stone under your soles feels ancient and aware. Like it's watching you. The bath is rectangular, about 12 meters long, 2 meters deep. Its brickwork is flawless, its edges sharp despite the centuries. Water still clings to the floor in puddles, trapped like the memory of purification itself. You reach down, touch it. It's cold, clean, smells faintly of earth and something herbal. Maybe neem, maybe eucalyptus, maybe memory. You lower yourself in. The water doesn't splash, it sighs. Your skin tightens. Your breath hitches. And just for a moment, the silence of the city invades your bloodstream. You feel like you're dissolving into the past. No one speaks in a great bath. Not even whispers. The only sound is dripping, soft, slow, eternal. It echoes off the stone walls like the ticking of a clock that's forgotten what time is. There are others here. Men, women, children. Naked, mostly. Modesty is a future invention. They bathe not to cleanse the body, but to align it. Because here, purity isn't about morality. It's about harmony, about rhythm, about keeping the machine of the city running. Grease the gears with water, and only then may you feed the fire. You close your eyes and submerge fully. For 1 second, just one, you hear nothing. Not the echoes, not your heartbeat, not even the rustle of cloth on stone. Just stillness. And in that stillness, a question rises. What were they washing away? Not sin. There are no temples here. No idols demanding sacrifice. Not shame. There is no religion here. At least, not one we understand. So what then? Why did these people build a monumental bath in the heart of their city, surround it with ritual, and leave no explanation? Some archaeologists say it was for ceremony. Others think it was political. But you're here now, soaked to the bone in a silence older than theology, and you're not so sure. This feels deeper, stranger, more existential. Maybe it wasn't about becoming clean. Maybe it was about becoming part of the city. You step out of the bath. The air hits your skin like a whisper. Cold. Knowing. A woman hands you a cloth. She doesn't look at you. You dry yourself. No applause. No transformation. No divine light from above. Just a body prepared. Now you may eat. And suddenly it clicks. This city doesn't need kings or temples because the ritual is built into the routine. Clean first, then cook. Wash your hands before trading. Sweep your roof before gossiping. In Mohenjo-Daro, the sacred is hidden in the mundane. Divinity lives in the design. You walk away from the bath, body tingling, brain buzzing. Your stomach growls, finally. But now, food isn't just nourishment. It's the next step in the sacred cycle. And you're ready for it. But as you look back at the great bath, a thought clings to your wet skin like a second layer of flesh. What happens to a city that builds its soul out of habits when the habits stop? You don't know it yet, but the bath will dry. The people will leave. The silence will win. And no one will remember why they ever came here in the first place. You're starting to notice it now. Not the silence that's already woven itself into your skin. No, what you're noticing is the bricks. They're everywhere, under your feet, in the walls, forming stairs, benches, courtyards, grain bins. A whole city made of rectangles, stacked like whispers, laid one after another by hands long turned to dust. But not just any bricks. These are standardized, uniform, meticulously shaped, in proportions of 1:2:4. Length, width, height, over and over again, like a mantra baked in clay. It's obsessive. It's methodical. It's intimate. You crouch down, pick one up. It's warm from the sun, rough at the edges, and heavier than you expected. You hold it like a relic, because that's exactly what it is. This was someone's job. All day, every day, dig the silt, shape the mold, dry it, fire it, stack it, and not for glory, not for pyramids or palaces, not for statues that bear the maker's name, but for function, for home, for life. Every brick was a decision, every wall a sentence, and a whole city a story told in silence. You walk into a narrow alley. The bricks here rise around you like a canyon. The space is tight, just enough for two bodies to pass if one of them exhales. But even this feels intentional, designed. The city breathes through alleys like this. Wind flows, air cools, noise doesn't carry. Even chaos has been engineered out. There's a moment when you stop and place your hand on the wall. Not for balance, not for curiosity, but to listen. It's absurd, of course. Bricks don't talk. But if they did, oh, if they did, they would tell you about the mother who leaned here while scolding her child. The man who carved a message into the mortar with a fingernail. Something only he understood. The teenager who scratched a secret kiss into the wall, just below where no one could see. They'd tell you about the builders, the brickmakers, the ones who woke before the sun, hands blistered, backs bent, placing piece after piece after piece. Not because they were slaves, but because this was their world, their way, their version of forever. You walk past a building site. A stack of unused bricks waits patiently in a corner, like loyal dogs. There's a half-built platform nearby, and for a moment, just a fleeting flicker, you see it. The city being built. You hear voices, not real ones, but echoes of effort. Men calling for more mud. Children carrying water in clay pots. Giggling until someone hushes them. A woman singing, not a song, but a rhythm to pace the stacking. And it hits you. This city was not founded in the way we usually tell history. There was no conquest, no divine decree, no mythological origin story involving serpents or suns. Mohenjo-Daro was grown, brick by brick, decision by decision, inches at a time. It didn't need kings because its foundation wasn't a throne. It was the common hand, the anonymous builder, the everyday rhythm of hands meeting clay. You reach a large structure. The bricks here are older, darker, maybe charred. You're not sure. Some believe this was a granary. Others say it was a public hall. No one really knows. Because this city, for all its planning, all its efficiency, left no blueprints. You run your fingers along the seams between the bricks. They're tight, still holding after 4,000 years. And yet, you feel a crack. Not in the wall, in the story. Because no matter how perfect these bricks are, no matter how meticulous the design, the city is gone. You feel it again. That uncomfortable truth pressing against the back of your mind like a dream you almost remember. Maybe perfection isn't sustainable. Maybe civilization, when built too precisely, becomes brittle. You look up. The sky is pale now. A bird circles overhead, silent, indifferent. And below, the bricks whisper still. Not in words, but in presence. We were here, they seem to say. We mattered. We held things together. And now it's you who's listening and walking and remembering what no one wrote down. Just don't forget, civilization doesn't begin with laws or swords or scriptures. It begins with a brick. Let's be honest. You weren't expecting plumbing. You came here for mystery, maybe even magic. You wanted whispers of forgotten gods, the scent of incense, a secret underground chamber, something that tastes like myth. Instead, you find drains, and not just holes in the ground, not sloppy ditches, no puddles breeding disease. We're talking about a full-blown, meticulously engineered, gravity-fed urban sanitation system from nearly 5,000 years ago. That's right. In a world where modern cities can't survive a single thunderstorm without Twitter collapsing under the weight of flooded subway memes, Mohenjo-Daro was quietly and successfully flushing. You're standing in the middle of a narrow street, staring at a trench carved with such precision that water still knows how to find its way home. The drain runs along the side of the road, covered with stone slabs, like a secret bloodstream beneath the city's skin. You crouch and lift one of the slabs. Beneath it, a tunnel, narrow but deep, lined with brick, still intact, still functional. You could pour water in now. It would vanish with purpose. Your jaw tightens with the kind of jealousy usually reserved for people with organized sock drawers. Because this is elegance and filth. And that's just the beginning. You follow the drain. It twists gently, keeping to the geometry of the streets, passing between homes like a monk passing through a marketplace. Quiet, dignified, unnoticed unless you're paying attention. Each house connects to it, privately, efficiently. Most of them have their own toilets. Let that sink in. Toilets, not pits, not holes in the woods, not communal outhouses buzzing with flies and regret. Actual, indoor, elevated toilets, connected to sloped drains that feed into the central sewer line and flush waste away with water and gravity. All this while Europe was still figuring out that bathing doesn't make your soul evaporate. You peek inside one of these homes. The bathroom is a small, brick-lined corner, slightly elevated. Nothing flashy, just smart, practical, clean. There's a small pot of water next to it, because paper isn't a thing, and bidets won't exist for millennia. But you get the point. The functionality is astonishing. And here's the kicker. There's no evidence of caste-based access. No royal toilets with gold handles. No peasant gutters overflowing in shame. Just parity. Water for everyone. Cleanliness for everyone. A shared understanding that sanitation is civilization. You begin to realize something almost embarrassing. They didn't just understand hygiene. They respected it. Because here, filth wasn't a byproduct of living. It was a choice. And Mohenjo-Daro chose to live clean. But it's not just about the drains. It's about what the drains say. They speak of foresight, of architects who thought not just about homes, but about waste, that darkest, most human reality. They understood that what we discard defines us just as much as what we build. And this city built itself on the belief that even our shit should be carried away with dignity. You keep walking. You see intersections where larger drains meet smaller ones. Grates angled perfectly to allow water in, but block debris. Inspection holes. Yes, inspection holes, placed strategically for cleaning. You blink, half expecting a sanitation worker from 2025 to climb out with a clipboard and a sigh. And then you reach a larger structure, possibly a public building. At its rear, a covered corridor leads to a drainage chamber. It's big, brick-lined, still solid. Some think it was part of a public latrine. Others believe it managed stormwater overflow. Either way, it worked. You run your hand along the inside of the chamber. The brick is cool, slick with the memory of running water. You smell dampness, not rot, not decay, just ancient moisture clinging to the bones of a city that never wanted to smell bad. You close your eyes, and in the dark, you imagine it. People walking these streets, washing, pouring out bathwater, emptying waste, watching it all vanish down the channels. No fanfare, no gratitude, just silent gratitude that the system does its job. Because when systems work, no one notices, until they don't. And then everything collapses, and you wonder, did it happen here? Did the drains clog? Did the water turn on them? Did the silence begin with a gurgle? You don't know. No one does. But the drains are still here, still waiting, still cleaner than your apartment. And that should scare you a little. You've walked the streets. You felt the bricks under your feet. You've bathed in sacred silence and marveled at drains that knew more about order than your local government. But now you're looking for meaning. You crave words, stories, something carved in stone or inked in scrolls, something to explain who these people were. And that's when you realize the strangest thing of all. There are no scribes, no epics, no chronicles, no engraved monuments telling you about King so-and-so who conquered such and such on the glorious day of eternal victory and tax increases. Nothing. Not even graffiti. Not even Gopal was here. You're standing in the middle of one of the most advanced cities of the ancient world, and it left behind no voice. But the city still spoke, just not in a language you can read. You find a seal. It's small, soapstone, warm in your palm from the morning sun. On it, an animal, maybe a unicorn, maybe a bull, maybe both. Below it, a line of symbols. Angular, curved, delicate, untranslated. This is the writing of the Indus Valley civilization. Thousands of examples have been found on seals, pottery, tablets, tools. And yet, no one knows what they say. No Rosetta Stone. No bilingual inscriptions. No ancient scholar left a handy, learn Indus script in 30 days, manual buried in the ruins. And so, every symbol is a mystery. Every seal, a whisper in a language no one understands. You stare at the characters. Some look like trees. Others like fish, arrows, combs, doors. Or maybe they're none of those things. Maybe your modern brain is just desperate for patterns, for metaphors it can grasp. The unicorn, that shows up a lot. It's not the European kind, all glitter and virgins and sparkly nonsense. This one is lean, proud, mysterious. It stares to the left, always to the left, like it's guarding something just out of frame. Maybe it's a totem. Maybe it's a joke. Maybe it's a trademark. Or maybe it's a language designed to be forgotten. You walk into a house, quiet, like the others. On the wall, near what might have been a kitchen shelf, you see something faint scratched into the plaster. Not a picture, not a symbol, just marks, like someone tried to say something, and then stopped. That's what this whole city feels like like a conversation you walked in on halfway through, like a voice that was about to explain everything, and then paused, and never resumed. You pick up another seal. This one's darker, heavier, the same symbols carefully incised. You imagine the hands that carve them, firm, patient, precise. Not just skilled, but believing that the message mattered, that someone someday would read it. Oops, because no one can. You place the seal back down. Your fingers linger. There's something deeply sad about it. Not tragic, not dramatic, just the soft sorrow of being misunderstood for eternity. You think of all the things they might have written. A prayer for safe trade. A record of barley shipments. A poem about a lost lover. A law about where not to poop. But you'll never know, and that's the point. This city didn't build its legacy with epic battles or sacred texts. It didn't need scribes immortalizing its kings or generals with flowery exaggeration. It built in silence. And now, that silence is all you have. You stand in the center of a street, holding a seal no one can read, surrounded by walls no one remembers, in a city that planned everything except its legacy. And you wonder, was that the plan all along? To speak in symbols no one could ever twist? To communicate not with words, but with structure, order, and absence? Because maybe that's the genius of Mohenjo-Daro. It didn't write stories. It became one, and you're part of it now. Reading a book with no letters, hearing a voice with no sound, holding a message with no translation. But if you listen closely, you can almost hear it. You're hungry. It hits you suddenly, after the bath, after the silence, after the seals that said nothing and told you everything. Your stomach growls like it's remembering its purpose. And now, drawn by instinct and curiosity, or maybe just the scent of roasted grains drifting through the morning haze, you follow the path toward the marketplace. But don't imagine anything too grand. No marble columns, no bustling agora, no gilded coins clinking in merchant hands. This is not Athens, not Babylon, not your local Whole Foods. This is Mohenjo-Daro, and it sells in silence. The street widens, just slightly, enough for a few stalls, a few cloths stretched across the ground, a few eyes watching you with polite disinterest. The air is thick with dust and the smell of dry lentils, earthy, raw, ancient. There's a hint of oil in the air, pungent and familiar, like burnt sesame or despair. You step forward, and you're greeted not with shouting, not with bartering voices, but with the sound of things being exchanged. A woman holds out a bowl of beads, her eyes not meeting yours. She doesn't say a word. She simply points to a small weight on a scale, perfectly carved, geometrically smug, and waits. You realize quickly, this market doesn't trade in chaos. It trades in ritual. Transactions are exact, measured, almost ceremonial. You pass a stand with tiny, polished carnelian stones, beads as red as dried blood, shaped like teardrops. You pick one up. It's smooth, absurdly so. Someone spent hours on this. Not out of luxury, but precision. The stall owner nods once. No haggling, no pitch. Either you understand its value, or you don't. Further down, a man is selling what might be spices, or ground roots, or just colored dust that smells vaguely of fennel and ash. Tiny piles, arranged like pyramids on flat clay tiles. You inhale. Your sinuses react immediately. One side clears, the other feels like it's on fire. Effective. You see no coins, no bronze, no silver, just weights. These people didn't need money the way you know it. They measured worth in balance. A jar of oil weighs this much. A length of cloth that much. It's precise, practical, and utterly impersonal. And yet, there's tension here. Quiet but present. A woman selling sesame paste flinches when a child drops a pot. A vendor of dried fish eyes his neighbor with suspicion, like they've been through this before. You sense it, not in volume, but in vibration. Something is off. Something has shifted. Maybe it's the weather. The air tastes wrong. A hint of rot beneath the cumin. Maybe it's the river. Trade routes drying up. Barges arriving late, or not at all. Or maybe it's something deeper. Something everyone feels, but no one names. You walk past a trader stacking cloth, dyed a deep indigo, rich and almost royal. He's alone. His hands move automatically, folding and folding, as if trying to tame the fabric into obedience. You ask nothing. He offers nothing. And that's what stings. No one asks you where you're from. No one offers you a story. No one says, "Come, taste this. It will change your life." This market doesn't care who you are. It doesn't try to enchant you. It simply exists. A transactional dream. A machine made of gestures, glances, and rules no one questions. You sit near the edge, on a broken step once used by 100 feet a day. The sun is higher now. The smells intensify. Lentils drying in baskets. Oil beginning to smoke. Something sweet starting to spoil. And you realize something painful. There is no joy here. No singing. No laughing. No children playing tag between stalls. No flirtation between vendor and buyer. Just eyes. Just weight. Just the clinking of ceramic pots against wooden scales. You expected color, spice, laughter, but instead you got burnt hope. Because beneath all this order, this beautiful, rational, architectural sanity, there's a weariness. A sense that something is slowly crumbling. Not with a crash, not with fire, but like a thread unraveling from the inside of a sleeve. You look at the people. They look past you. They're surviving, selling, folding, measuring, but not living. And you can't help but think, maybe this is what a civilization looks like just before it vanishes. Not glorious, not tragic, just tired. A city where even the marketplace forgot how to speak. You've wandered through silence. You've traced stories in brick, weighed hope in lentils, and watched a marketplace breathe without sound. And just when you start to think this city is made only of stone and rules and order, you see her. Not her exactly. Them. The women of Mohenjo-Daro. They move through the city like silk drawn over stone. Quiet, fluid, intentional. And even in this hushed metropolis, they don't fade into the background. They shape it. You spot the first one near the edge of a house, kneeling beside a grinding stone, turning lentils into paste with the slow, rhythmic grace of someone who's done this 1,000 times and will do it 1,000 more. Her arms are strong. Her bangles clink like soft laughter. Her sari is simple, but her hair is braided like royalty. Tight, intricate plaits, pulled with care, adorned with tiny beads and bits of copper that catch the sun like fireflies. It's not just grooming, it's a statement. No gold, no crown, just a braid that says, "I was here," and she is not alone. You see them in threes, in pairs, in clusters. On rooftops, weaving reeds into baskets. At wells, drawing water with ropes knotted by hands that know how to hold weight. In doorways, combing each other's hair, eyes half-lidded, as if grooming were a meditation, or a conversation deeper than speech. You were told once that history is written by men. But here, in Mohenjo-Daro, history is worn in glass bangles, in copper earrings, in bone combs passed from mother to daughter like unspoken memory. The women are not veiled, not hidden, not subservient shadows flitting behind clay walls. They are present, not loud but central. They speak in gestures, glances, the occasional murmur. You can't make out their language, but you don't need to. The way one tilts her head while handing a jar to another? That's fluency. You pass a house where incense burns slowly in a clay pot. Inside, two women are preparing something thick and sweet, ground dates, maybe, or some kind of grain paste. One tastes it, winces, adds a pinch of something bitter. The other smiles. You've seen this before. In your kitchen. In your grandmother's kitchen. Across time, across oceans. They might not write stories, these women, but they live them, and their bodies remember. You notice their posture, shoulders straight, back strong. These are not pampered figures from ivory towers. These are workers, makers, keepers. You see a child run into one of their arms. She doesn't scold. She lifts him with ease and balance, places him on her hip, continues grinding millet with the other hand. A queen in domestic exile. You begin to suspect something you weren't taught in school. Maybe the power in this city didn't wear a beard or sit on a throne. Maybe it braided its hair every morning and went to fetch water. The archaeological record doesn't say much about them. No named queens, no heroic myths, no statues 10 feet high, just amulets, figurines, bangles, and silence. But the silence isn't erasure. It's intentional. They didn't carve their stories into walls. They wove them into daily life, into the unglamorous repetition of care. And now you see the outline of that legacy, not in monuments, but in the way this city refuses to fall apart. Because someone held it together, not with war, not with speeches, but with water, with flour, with fire, with hands. You watch a girl help her grandmother twist a strand of hair into a loop. She tucks it behind her ear, smiles. The braid is complete. The girl looks older now, not in years, but in memory, as if that simple act holds centuries into the present. And you feel, for the first time since arriving, warmth, not sunlight, not heat, but the warmth of continuity, of unseen strength, of lives lived so fully, so attentively, that they didn't need to be remembered, because they were never really forgotten. You move on, and as you leave the courtyard, a breeze catches the scent of jasmine from someone's hair. It follows you down the alley, soft, regal, undeniable, and you realize you've been walking through a kingdom all along. You just weren't looking at the throne. You were warned about the heat. The sun here doesn't shine, it presses. It sticks to your neck, your shoulders, the backs of your knees. It wraps around you like an ancient tax collector you can't avoid. But no one warned you about the night. Because in Mohenjo-Daro, night doesn't fall. It sinks, slowly, stealthily, like wet cloth draped over the city, muffling its edges, soaking into its corners, silencing even the insects that chirped all day like desperate philosophers. By the time the last stall closes and the final water jar is lowered into the well, the light is gone, not faded, but absorbed, swallowed whole by a sky too dark to explain. There are no street lamps, no glowing screens to push back the shadows, just the hush of oil lamps and the long, breathing quiet of ancient sleep. You're on a rooftop again. Your skin still carries the heat of the day, and the clay tiles beneath you are only now beginning to cool. You lie back, arms sprawled, staring up at a sky so unpolluted it feels arrogant. The stars here don't twinkle. They burn. But there are no constellations to name them. No written myths. No drawings on the walls. No record of gods chasing maidens across the cosmos. Just patterns. Repetition. A sky organized, perhaps admired, but not explained. The city, even at night, remains tidy. Orderly. Like a child's toy box packed too neatly for anyone to have truly played with it. And yet, you begin to hear things. Not loud things, subtle things. The creak of a clay pot settling. The low murmur of a lullaby sung in a language no one speaks anymore. The soft brushing sound of a woman combing her daughter's hair in the dark. untangling both knots and thoughts. And underneath all of it, the hum of something deeper, something like breath, like the city itself is dreaming. You wonder what it dreams of. Maybe it dreams of river barges, loaded with cotton and beads and jars of oil, drifting along moonlit canals. Maybe it dreams of laughter that no longer echoes. Maybe it dreams of you, a stranger from a world that forgot its name. The temperature drops. It's not cold, not truly, but the air grows thick, moist, heavy in a way that makes your chest feel borrowed. You pull your shawl tighter, and then you smell it. Smoke, not fire, no. This city is too careful for that. Just a thin ribbon of smoke curling upward from a nearby roof. Someone is burning something, herbs, maybe, or dried dung, or incense made from roots too bitter to eat. It mixes with the scent of river clay and oil and dust. And suddenly, the city feels close, intimate, like it's wrapping around you. Not to trap you, not to comfort you, just to exist with you. You close your eyes, and in the distance, you hear water. Not rain, not flood, just the soft splash of a jar being dipped. One last fill for the night. A final act of care before the city folds itself into dreams. You sit up. From this rooftop, you can see the rooftops of others, flat, geometric islands scattered in neat rows. Families lie side by side, heads turned to the stars. No chatter, no stories, just breathing. You wonder if they feel it too. This slow drowning, this peaceful suffocation. Night here doesn't soothe. It claims. It doesn't promise dreams. It promises pause. The city, always so functional, so precise, has finally stopped. And that is more terrifying than any scream. Because in most cities, nightfall is messy, loud. It smells like wine and smoke and regret. But in Mohenjo-Daro, it's perfect, too perfect. And perfection is never kind. You lie back down. The sky above you says nothing. The stars remain silent. The rooftop beneath you still holds the memory of sun. But now, even that warmth is fading. And as your eyes flutter shut, just before sleep takes you, you wonder, what if the night never ended here? What if this city fell not to war or water or plague, but to stillness? A stillness so complete, so practiced, so soft, that it swallowed time itself. You wake slowly, not because something startles you. There are no alarms here, no honking cars, no digital voices demanding your attention with false urgency. You wake because the sun has decided it's time. That's how things work in Mohenjo-Daro. There is no choice, only rhythm. You stretch on your rooftop bed. No mattress, no blanket, just woven matting atop clay. And your joints pop like quiet punctuation. The city is already stirring beneath you, though it makes no sound. You descend the ladder carefully. The rungs are worn smooth by the feet of 100 lives you'll never meet. You step into the street. The air is thick with dawn, and that's when it hits you again, like it has every morning since you arrived. This place doesn't remember itself, not in the way other cities do. There are no records, no scrolls, no stone tablets, no clay cylinders detailing laws, wars, births, or divine dreams. Not even the obligatory self-aggrandizing inscription that says, I, King whoever, built this place with sweat and glory, and you should be grateful. Nothing. You're in one of the most advanced urban centers of the ancient world, and it left behind no autobiography. That's not normal. That's not human. Because humans, let's be honest, are narcissists. We name buildings after ourselves. We graffiti our initials into wet cement. We document lunch. But here, no tombs of kings, no monuments to battles, no temples carved into cliff faces with sacred hymns etched in gold. Just bricks, just streets, just systems, It's as if the entire city was designed not to be remembered, but to simply work. And that's exactly what it did. For centuries, you wander toward the center of town, toward the raised mound that some think might have been an acropolis or a gathering place, or a platform for grain storage. Maybe all three, maybe none. No one knows, because no one left a note, not even a doodle. You think of other ancient cities. Mesopotamia, where kings carved edicts in stone with all the subtlety of a drunk god. Egypt, where every tomb is a biography in hieroglyphs. Even in chaos, even in war, they wrote. But here, the silence is more than an absence. It's a decision. What kind of people build a city this advanced and leave behind no story? You pass a group of workers lifting bricks, still rebuilding, always rebuilding. Their arms move in rhythm, like a prayer made of motion. They don't chant. They don't celebrate. They don't name what they're doing. They just do it. And that, perhaps, is the answer. Maybe they didn't write because they didn't need to. Maybe their legacy wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to be lived. Maybe they believed memory lives in systems, in clean water, in planned streets, in houses that breathe with the people inside them. And yet, something feels wrong, because this city did vanish. And now all those unspoken records, the memories tucked into morning routines, the data stored in habits and hand movements, they're gone. All that's left are ruins. And questions. You stop by a storage room. Inside, there are rows of small terracotta pots, some broken, some whole. A rat scurries across the floor and disappears into a crack in the wall. You stare at the jars. You think, what do they hold? Wheat? Oil? Spices? Ink? Secrets? No one cataloged them. No list survives. Just shards. You kneel. Pick up a broken fragment. It's smooth in your hand, glazed with age. You turn it over. On the inside, a faint mark. Not a letter, just a scratch. Maybe it meant something. Maybe it was a mistake. But it's all you have. And then you understand something difficult. This city didn't forget. It chose not to remember in the way we understand memory. It placed its trust in design, not description. In movement, not myth. And so, when the last pot shattered and the last house emptied and the last brick was placed, the city didn't scream. It didn't panic. It didn't plead for remembrance. It simply went quiet. And that is far more terrifying than any tomb. Because when a civilization dies without records, it doesn't become legend. It becomes a riddle. When you're now trapped inside, with no key and no ending. There he is. You didn't expect him, did you? Not after all this talk of silence and symmetry and a civilization with no kings, no gods, no written pride. But you turn a corner, and there he is, watching you. His eyes don't follow you, but they don't need to. They're half-lidded, carved in eternal knowing. Smug, serene, unimpressed. He's barely the size of your hand. Just a bust. No legs, no arms, no grand sword or staff. Carved from soapstone so smooth, it feels like skin. Draped in a patterned robe that might have once shimmered with paint. And that expression, that expression, you've seen it before. On the face of a monk who's about to say something that will destroy your ego. On the face of a therapist who knows your childhood trauma before you do. On the face of a stranger in a crowd who sees right through your carefully assembled self. They call him the Priest King, a title that tells you more about modern confusion than ancient truth. Because here's the thing. We have no idea who he was. Some say he ruled Mohenjo-Daro. Others say he was a spiritual figure, a sage, a shaman, a keeper of rituals. Others still argue he was neither, just a rich man, a merchant, a nobody with good taste and a talented sculptor. You crouch in front of him. He's displayed now in a museum, far from the land he was carved in, far from the sun, the smoke, the jasmine-scented air. But in your memory, here, in his city, he's still sitting, still silent, still judging. His robe is patterned with trefoils, three-leaf designs, carefully etched with maddening precision. His hair is pulled back tight. His beard is stylized, controlled. His posture is upright, unbothered. And still, no inscription, no name, not even a humble "this bus sponsored by your local granary association." He exists in a gap between power and anonymity. You imagine him alive, not giving speeches from balconies, not parading down the streets on a chariot pulled by dyed oxen, but sitting, watching, maybe conducting rituals in that great bath you visited, maybe organizing trade agreements with silent nods and calculated tilts of the head, maybe doing nothing at all except existing beautifully. Because in Mohenjo-Daro, power wasn't loud. It didn't wear gold. It didn't shout its lineage. It didn't raise monuments to itself. It just sat there, immovable, untranslated, like a riddle sculpted into human form. You reach out, hypothetically, and try to trace his gaze. It isn't directed at anything. It stares just slightly past you, like he's looking at something behind you, something that hasn't happened yet. Maybe he's looking at the collapse, or maybe he's looking at you. You, standing thousands of years later, desperate for meaning, projecting royalty and priesthood onto a man whose only recorded feature is that he existed well enough to be remembered in stone. And yet, no one built him a temple, no altar, no offerings, no tomb, no divine halo, just a bust in a city that hated hierarchy and adored balance. So what do you do with him? If he was a priest, where's the ritual? If he was a king, where's the kingdom? If he was a god, where's the faith? And if he was none of those things, then maybe the mystery isn't in what we don't know, but in what we need him to be. Because we crave stories with characters, heroes, villains, leaders with names and destinies. But Mohenjo-Daro doesn't care about your narrative needs. It gives you this man, serene, sculpted, silent, unimpressed by your curiosity, unaffected by time. And maybe that's the point. Maybe he's not here to explain anything. Maybe he's here to remind you that some civilizations don't need kings. That power can be quiet. That memory doesn't need a name. You stand up, the weight of his gaze still lingering in your chest. And you realize, with a strange chill, he's not watching history. He's watching you. You return to the streets. You've seen the baths, the drains, the beads, the priest king who may or may not have ruled anyone. You've walked on rooftops, touched bricks still whispering with warmth, inhaled lentil smoke in silence until they tasted the same. But now something feels off. The streets are too clean, too still, too quiet. At first, it was impressive, civilized, the kind of planned perfection that makes modern urban design feel like a toddler's doodle. But now it starts to itch at the back of your skull. It's not just the absence of noise, it's the deliberate silence. You walk down one of the main avenues. It's wide, straight, meticulously aligned with the cardinal points. The bricks beneath your feet have been placed with almost obsessive precision. There's no trash, no scattered pottery shards, no signs of daily human mess, just order. And that's when the unease creeps in, because where there is too much order, something is being suppressed. You look around. Windows are narrow, doors are few, no balconies, no ornamental flair, just walls. Flat, repetitive, practical. The city doesn't smile. It doesn't flirt. It doesn't dance. It functions. You pass a cluster of homes. Inside one, a woman is grinding grain. A child watches her in silence. In another, a man adjusts a pot on a small fire. No one talks. No one laughs. No one shouts greetings to a neighbor from across the street. You try it. You nod at a passerby. They glance at you, then look away. Not rudely, just as if interaction were unnecessary. The city has reduced human contact to a minimum viable product. Even the children, those eternal rebels against order, are subdued. They don't chase each other in the alleys. They don't climb walls or scream over games. They walk quietly, watch, obey, and you think something is missing. Not objects, not buildings, not food or water. Something human. Where's the chaos of living? Where are the lovers arguing? The brothers wrestling in the dirt? The women singing while they work? The angry shopkeeper yelling about a stolen chicken? Where's the imperfection? You walk further, hoping to find it. But every street looks the same. Every house follows the same layout. It's as if the entire city was copied and pasted from one original blueprint. The architecture is stunning. The engineering divine. But the soul? You're not so sure. You begin to wonder if this was ever a place of joy, or if it was only ever meant to be efficient. A machine disguised as a city. Or maybe not disguised at all. You stop beside a drain. The water trickling beneath it is clean. Too clean. As if the city's goal wasn't just to manage waste, but to eliminate it entirely. Not just physically, spiritually, emotionally. And there it is again, that itch. Because people are messy, loud, emotional. We leave things behind. We argue. We kiss in public. We cry over spilled millet. But here, it feels like those parts were designed out of the system. You place your hand on the wall. It's warm, alive in its own way. And yet, you can't shake the feeling that this place was never built for human souls, just human bodies. And what happens to a city where bodies are cared for, but souls are neglected? You keep walking, past more homes, past more doors that never creak open, past more people whose eyes glance off you like sunlight on stone. And you begin to understand something terrible. This city didn't die with a scream. It died with a sigh. A long, quiet, collective sigh of people who forgot how to live because everything worked too well, too quietly, too efficiently, until one day someone didn't show up at the well. And no one asked why. And nothing changed because the system didn't need them. That's the price of perfection. Not war, not fire, just absence. And now, as the shadows grow longer and the silence grows heavier, you wonder, was it always this quiet? Or did the city teach itself to be silent? You take another step. It echoes, alone. You hear it before you see it. Not a roar, not the thunder of white water crashing against stone. Just a soft, endless murmur, like someone humming a song they never quite finish. A lullaby in a language only rivers speak. That's the Indus, the mother vein, the silent heart of this city. It flows east of the ruins, slipping past the edge of memory like a silver serpent, older than myth, deeper than architecture. You walk toward it, and as you go, the air changes. Cooler now, more humid. It smells of wet reeds, of silt stirred by ancient current, of something living that no longer breathes but refuses to decay. And then you see it, a vast ribbon of water, slow and glassy, glinting like forgotten treasure beneath the sun. But it's not what it once was. The banks have shifted. The river has moved on, like a god that grew bored and wandered elsewhere. You stand at the edge of the ruins and look out. The Indus doesn't rage. It doesn't beg to be remembered. It simply is indifferent to the bones of cities and the questions of men. But you feel it, in your skin, in your chest, a presence, somewhere between sacred and indifferent. This is not just a river. This is the reason Mohenjo-Daro existed at all. Because without water, there is no city. There are no bricks, no baths, no drainage systems so advanced they mock your plumbing. Water built this city, and maybe, just maybe, it destroyed it too. You kneel by the bank and touch the surface. It's colder than it should be, clean, but not comforting, as if it remembers what it took. Some archaeologists say the river changed course, that trade dried up, that the fertile lands turned brittle, that the lifeline of the city became its undoing. Others say it was floods, sudden, violent, unforgiving, that the same river which nourished the people also drowned them, quietly, repeatedly, until they left. But the truth? The river isn't talking. It never did. You watch the current pull fragments of reed and dust downstream. The water carries everything, without effort, without judgment. And you realize something strange. This river doesn't care about civilization. It flows for itself. In Mohenjo-Daro, it was just an intermission in the river's long monologue. A pause, a whisper between bends. You think of all the lives built around this current. The boats loaded with spices and cotton. The laughter of children bathing in the shallows. The priests, or whatever they were, pouring libations into the water, hoping for blessings or balance. And now, nothing. Just you. A stranger touching what thousands once touched. Listening to the same flow, now carrying only absence. You stand. Look back toward the city. From here, it looks almost perfect again. The rooftops geometric and still. The streets clean. The silence earned. Like it was always meant to be this way. But the river tells you otherwise. Not in words. In motion. It reminds you that nothing holds still forever. That even the most symmetrical civilization can be undone by a shift. A drought. A flood. A trickle becoming a torrent. A god choosing a new direction. You step away from the bank. The water behind you keeps moving. It doesn't stop to mourn. It doesn't pause to reflect. And neither did the people. They didn't carve warnings in stone. They didn't build a wall against the future. They saw the river turn its face, and they left. No rebellion. No war. No tragedy you can name. Just a whisper. Then silence. And now, standing between water and ruin, you finally understand. The river remembers. It just chooses not to speak. You're walking through the upper part of the city now, what archaeologists call the citadel, though it hardly lives up to the drama of the word. No looming towers. No soldiers. No carved walls screaming of conquest. Just elevated ground. Bricks. Silence. And something else. Something beneath your feet. Something that doesn't belong. The ground shifts slightly beneath your steps. Not enough to trip you, but enough to remind you that this city was not built on permanence. It was built on trust. Trust in the earth. Trust in the river. Trust in routine. But trust is dangerous, because sometimes the earth moves. They say there are earthquakes. Not once. Not twice. But again and again. Subtle. Slow. Not catastrophic, but persistent. Not the kind that sends temples toppling and people screaming into the streets. The kind that whispers collapse. A crack in the wall. A step now uneven. A drain that suddenly doesn't flow quite right. Little things. Barely noticeable. Until they are. You stop in the middle of a room. The floor is off-kilter. Not dramatically, but enough. The bricks near the corner are warped. Pressed in like something leaned too hard against them. You crouch. Trace the curve with your hand. The earth breathed here, and the city held its breath. Because what do you do when the very ground beneath you betrays you? Not violently, but patiently. You adapt. You adjust. You pretend it isn't happening. But the body remembers. And so does the city. You notice it now. The architectural corrections. The makeshift reinforcements. The small repairs that weren't part of the plan. A wall rebuilt at a slight angle. A doorway lowered. A new layer of bricks laid over an older, cracked one. Mohenjo-Daro fought back, but quietly. Like everything else here. No panic. No chaos. Just effort. Over and over. Against a force too big to name. Because how do you name an enemy that doesn't scream, doesn't march, doesn't threaten, just shifts beneath you? You walk through the ruins, and they begin to look different now. Not like a city abandoned, but like a city exhausted. Not broken, just tired of rebuilding. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not destruction, not invasion, not fire or famine, but the slow, numbing realization that you're always one tremor away from watching everything slip sideways. And no one is coming to save you. You pass a collapsed wall. The debris is too neat, too settled. You imagine the moment it gave in. Maybe at night, maybe when no one was home. No screams, just a soft collapse. Like the city exhaling something it had held too long. And no one rebuilt it. Because by then, they'd had enough. They'd rebuilt too many times. Trusted too often. Believed the ground would stay still if they just behaved correctly. If they bathed first, drained properly, followed the rules, walked in straight lines. But the earth does not care for rituals. It shifts. It reminds you that control is an illusion. That symmetry is temporary. That even a city as disciplined as Mohenjo-Daro was always one sigh away from failure. And here's the part that stings. No one wrote about it. No desperate inscription saying the ground betrayed us. No diary hidden in a jar. No prophecy carved in a brick. Just cracked walls. And absence. Because this city didn't tell its story. It became it. A place so confident in its order that it never imagined collapse could come slowly. Without warning, without blood, without reason. You stand still now. The wind moves around you. The ground beneath you is quiet. But somewhere in the dust, you can still feel the echo. It shook, and no one screamed. You're back in the heart of the city now. But something has changed. The streets haven't moved. The bricks haven't crumbled any more than they had yesterday. The river still murmurs in the distance. And yet, you feel it. A different kind of silence. Before, it was peaceful, functional, ritualistic. Now it's oppressive, heavy, like walking into a room where someone was just crying. There are no visible signs of catastrophe. No bones in the street. No signs of fire. No walls clawed with panic. And still, this place feels like it has been touched by something deeper than disaster. Something harder to name. You run your hand along a wall. The stone is still warm from the day's sun. Still solid. Still straight. But there's no life here anymore. Not even an echo. The stillness isn't just physical. It's spiritual, existential, and it doesn't feel natural. It feels cursed. Yes, you know, curse is a dramatic word. Modern historians would roll their eyes. They'll say climate change, trade disruption, tectonic instability. But this stillness, it's personal. It feels like a choice. Or worse, a surrender. You walk past a series of homes, each one identical to the next. Each one open, as if waiting for a return that never came. You step inside one. The air is stale, unmoved. A cooking pot lies on its side. A spindle sits half-wrapped with thread. A child's toy, 2 pebbles wrapped in cloth, lies in the corner, untouched. Not looted, not destroyed, just left. As if one day, someone stood in this doorway, looked at this life and decided. No more. No ceremony. No farewell. Just stillness. You walk back out. The street yawns ahead of you. Too wide. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like rest. It feels like a punishment. You think of the Great Bath. Of the Priest King. Of the endless bricks laid with such care. Of the perfect drains, the balanced scales, the rituals, the symmetry, the discipline. All of it built to create a world so ordered, so pure, so controlled. That chaos became taboo. Emotion became noise. Desire became disorder. Messiness, the very thing that makes us human, was designed out. And you wonder, what happens when a civilization pushes so hard for stillness, for cleanliness, for silence, for control, that it erases even itself? Maybe it didn't fall. Maybe it folded inward. Maybe the people didn't die or flee or starve. Maybe they just stopped building, stopped caring, stopped speaking, because stillness, when worshipped long enough, becomes a tomb. A beautiful, symmetrical, well-drained tomb. You sit on the edge of a platform. The dust clings to your clothes. The wind has stopped moving. Not a leaf rustles. Not a bird calls. It's unbearable now. This is not the silence of peace. This is the silence of absence. You remember the stories, not the real ones, the ones people whispered later. That the city was cursed. That its perfection angered the gods. That the river turned its face and left them to rot. Maybe none of it's true. But standing here, surrounded by structures too intact to be ruined and too empty to be alive, you understand why someone might believe it. Because this isn't a ruin. It's a city that abandoned itself. And now it waits, frozen in time, flawless in failure. A monument to the idea that silence could save us. That if we bathed enough, drained enough, aligned enough, we might escape entropy. But entropy doesn't care. Stillness doesn't stop the end. It just makes it quieter. And you're standing in the middle of it, listening to a silence that feels like it's staring back. You wake in the middle of the night. No sound, no movement, just the taste of something acrid on your tongue and the feeling that the darkness around you is not just an absence of light, but a presence. Your breath comes shallow. Your skin is damp. Your eyes adjust slowly. And for a moment, you're not in the present. You're somewhere else. In a city you've walked through 100 times by now, but this time, it's burning. Smoke pours from rooftops. Flickers of flame lick the sky like fingers trying to claw it open. The night smells of burnt oil, scorched grain, and something far worse, something human. But it's not real. It's a dream. You know it is. Because there's no evidence that Mohenjo-Daro ever burned. No fire layer. No charred bones. No ash. And yet, this dream, it feels truer than the silence you've been walking through all day. In it, people run. Not screaming, but moving quickly, urgently. Their faces are blank. They carry bundles, children, nothing. Their mouths are closed. As if even in their final hours, they've been taught not to make noise. You stand there, watching them flee a fire that isn't there. A woman passes you, her braid undone, her shawl dragging like smoke behind her. She looks at you as she runs. Not in fear, not in desperation, but in accusation. You came too late, her eyes seem to say. You came looking for reasons. We had none to give. The dream shifts. You're now in the great bath. Only this time, it's dry, cracked, blackened by soot. You step in. The bricks crumble under your feet like burnt parchment. You pick one up. It turns to ash in your hand. Suddenly, you're surrounded. Figures around the edge of the bath. Watching. Motionless. Featureless. Like the ghosts of all the lives this city never recorded. One of them steps forward. Maybe the priest king. Maybe a stranger. Maybe you. He raises his hand. Not to bless. Not to strike. Just to point. And when you follow his finger, you see the city burning. Not in fire, but in forgetting. Not with heat, but with cold. You jolt awake. There is no fire. Only stars. Only silence. Only the unbearable weight of absence. You sit up on your rooftop mat. The night is still. Too still. Not even a breeze to carry the memory of your dream away. And you realize something in this city did burn. Not buildings, not bodies, but something essential. Something that made people believe. In the order, in the rituals, in the city itself. And when that thing was gone, whatever it was, they didn't scream. They didn't riot. They didn't write it down. They just walked away, leaving behind a city so perfect, so complete, so cold, that even its collapse was silent. But your dream? Your dream told the truth no brick could hold. That somewhere, beneath the drains, and the balance and the silence. There was a moment when everything broke, not in violence, but in disbelief. And when people stop believing in the city, in the system, in each other, they don't need fire to leave. They just stop coming back. You lie down again. The stars look the same. The night feels thicker now. And you wonder, did Mohenjo-Daro die because it failed? Or because it was so perfect, it forgot to make people feel alive? You find it by accident. It's mid-morning now. The sun is already high and bored, spilling light across the stone with the same indifferent precision that shaped the city itself. You're walking without direction. No more maps, no more questions. Just letting your body lead where your mind refuses to go. That's when you see him, a small skeleton, curled in the fetal position, tucked beside a doorway, his tiny ribs bowed inwards like they're trying to protect what's no longer there. No jewelry, no burial mound, no offering bowl, just a thin layer of dust and time. He's not in a graveyard. He's not wrapped in linen or remembered in stone. He's just here, lying in the street, as if he simply sat down one day and forgot how to stand. You freeze, because you weren't expecting a body. This city, for all its mystery, had been bloodless so far. No battle scars, no skeletons in mass graves, no ruins soaked in mythic catastrophe. But this child changes that. Not because of how he died, but because of where he died, and how little anyone seems to have cared. You kneel beside him. Your shadow falls over his remains. The bones are light, fragile, like dry twigs snapped underfoot. The skull is tilted toward the wall, as if he turned his head to listen to something just before he stopped breathing. And you ask yourself the question you can't answer. Why was he alone? This wasn't a battlefield. This wasn't a temple ritual. This wasn't a plague pit. It's a street. A normal, clean, perfectly aligned street in the middle of a city that once had public baths, drainage systems, and balance beams for daily life. And yet, here is a child, unburied, unwept, unremembered. Some archaeologists say he may have been a victim of violence. There were other bodies found, scattered, a few with injuries. But nothing decisive, nothing that screams massacre. More likely, they say, he was left behind, in a confusion, in the exodus, in a collapse. Left behind because someone thought they'd come back, or because they had too many mouths to feed, or because they thought one child wouldn't matter. You stare longer than you should, because this isn't about ancient civilization anymore. This isn't about trade routes, or linguistic puzzles, or ritual purity. This is about a boy who died alone, in a city that made no noise as it abandoned him. What was his name? You'll never know. Or his last thoughts. Maybe he was hungry. Maybe he was calling for his mother. Maybe he was just tired of walking. The bricks around him are perfectly intact. The wall beside him shows no signs of struggle. There's no fire, no claw marks, no dramatic exit. Just silence. That same silence that's been stalking you since you arrived. And now, it's louder than ever. Because here is the cost of all that order, of all that efficiency, of building a city so optimized, so quiet, so clean that when it died, it didn't bother to mourn its children. You stand up, but your legs feel heavier now. The city feels heavier. The stillness no longer feels neutral. It feels complicit. You walk on, but your eyes keep drifting back. And you can't shake the feeling that this boy isn't just part of the past. He's a message, not from the gods, not from the ruins, but from the people who didn't write. He is the punctuation mark in a sentence you didn't know you were reading. A reminder that the most dangerous thing a civilization can do is believe it is too perfect to fail. Because when the system collapses, the drainage stops, the river shifts, the people leave, the last thing left behind is always a child, and no one remembers his name. You try to give it reason. Tectonic shifts, river migration, trade collapse, All the grown-up, respectable theories that archaeologists love to debate at conferences with bad lighting and even worse coffee. But none of them explain the feeling. The uncanny sensation that hangs over Mohenjo-Daro like smoke without a fire. That low, ancient hum that crawls into your bones and murmurs. This place didn't fall, it drifted. And so you ask the unaskable. What if they just stopped caring? Not because of war, not because of famine or flood, not even because of death, but because of boredom. It's not a theory you'll find in the textbooks. There's no journal article titled The Ennui Hypothesis of Indus Decline. But walk these streets long enough and it creeps in. That question, that whisper, that possibility that after centuries of perfection, after generations of ritual and order and bathing and building and draining and not writing, they looked around and thought, is this it? You sit now on the edge of a public platform, maybe a granary, maybe a civic hall, maybe a very symmetrical mystery. You watch the sun crawl across the baked bricks. Nothing moves, nothing interrupts, and you wonder what it felt like to live here at the end, when the river no longer provided in abundance, when the seals no longer arrived from distant lands, when the beads lost their sparkle and the streets their purpose. What happens when everything works until it doesn't spark joy? Because that's the thing about highly organized systems. They need belief, not religion, not gods, just faith in the function. But function is not feeling. You can bathe every morning, drain every drop, weigh every grain of lentil on a perfect stone scale, and still feel empty. Maybe it started small. A child refusing to wash. A pot left uncleaned. A vendor skipping the weight scale just once. And nothing collapsed. The city went on. The drains worked. The bricks held. But something cracked underneath. Not in the infrastructure. In the will. Because humans are not machines. We're rituals, yes. But we're also chaos. And when a city kills the chaos, it kills something vital. Maybe the last generations of Mohenjo-Daro didn't rebel. They just got tired. Tired of rules. Tired of the silence. Tired of living in a civilization that never changed, never sang, never let anyone be anything other than a cog in a very beautiful, very ancient machine. You think of family packing their things, not in panic, but in quiet resolve. A man tying up a bundle of grain. A woman folding one last cloth. A child looking back at a house she will not miss. No fire, no screams, just departure. And no one wrote why. Because what would they say? We left because it was all too clean. We left because we forgot how to feel. We left because we couldn't remember why we stayed. No, they left nothing. Just bricks. Just drains. Just balance. And absence. You walk again through the city, and now it feels less like a ruin and more like a monument to the quietest kind of death. The one that doesn't come with blood, but with indifference. Because not every civilization ends with a bang. Some end with a shrug. So yes, maybe it was plague, or drought, or earthquake, or maybe they just got bored, and no one came back. You've been searching for them since you arrived. Not consciously, perhaps, but deep down, beneath your careful observations and rational theories, you've been waiting to stumble on something divine. A statue, a shrine, a name. But in Mohenjo-Daro, the gods don't introduce themselves. They don't tower over city squares. They don't wear crowns or hold thunderbolts. They don't bleed or bless. Here, the divine is elusive, whispered through symbols no one can read, hinted at in fragments no one can place. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. You walk through what might have once been a ritual space. A small courtyard centered around a fire pit long cold, its edges blackened with centuries of silence. The floor is clean, geometrical. As always, there is order. As always, there is no inscription. but you feel it, a trace of something sacred. Not because someone told you so, but because your skin knows when it's being watched by something you can't see. You crouch beside the pit, run your fingers through the ashes. They're ancient, dry, scentless. But for a moment, you smell smoke. And then something else. Not memory, not incense, absence. Because the strangest thing about the Indus Valley civilization is that it seems to have misplaced its gods. No towering idols, no temples shouting dominance, no thunder in the heavens. There are small terracotta figurines, nude women, often called mother goddesses, though no one's sure. There are horned figures seated in yogic postures, proto-Shivas perhaps, or just men in fancy hats. There are amulets, talismans, carvings of sacred animals, bulls, elephants, unicorns that never existed. And yet, no hierarchy, no mythology, no pantheon, just fragments of faith without faces. You visit another house. In the corner, a niche in the wall. Some say it may have been a domestic altar. There's nothing left in it now. No icon, no candle, just dust. And you wonder, did these people not believe in gods? Or did they simply not need them to look like gods? Maybe the divine here wasn't loud or jealous. Maybe it didn't demand temples taller than trees. Maybe it lived in the everyday, in clean water, in smooth bricks, in symmetry. Maybe order itself was worship, not because it was beautiful, though it is, but because it worked. In a world where nature was chaos, floods, droughts, shifting rivers. Maybe the people of Mohenjo-Daro believed that to bring the gods closer, they had to mirror balance. Not through chance, not through sacrifice, but through design. A city that functioned was a city blessed. A home that drained was a home protected. A bath well used was a soul made clean. And yet, when it all began to unravel, when the drains clogged, when the water ran dry, when the bricks cracked, the gods said nothing. There were no prophecies, no desperate prayers carved in stone, no last-minute temples, just stillness, and then departure. Because maybe the gods here were not omnipotent beings. Maybe they were agreements between people, between structure and purpose, between earth and hope. And when the system faltered, the agreement broke. And the gods? They didn't die. They didn't fall. They were simply forgotten. Not cursed. Not overthrown. Just unspoken. Unnamed. Like songs no longer sung. Like languages no longer learned. Like children no longer told the stories that made them believe. You stand now in the middle of that same courtyard. The sun is high. There is no altar. There never was. And still, you feel watched. But not by gods. By questions. What if the divine was never meant to rule? What if it only asked us to pay attention? To shape our lives with care? To stack our bricks well? To leave the street clean? To bathe before we eat? What if that was the faith? And when we failed, not with violence, but with indifference, the gods in turn failed us. Or maybe just turned their gaze elsewhere. You step into the shadow of the wall. It's cool. It's quiet. You whisper a prayer, though you don't know who might hear it. And for the first time in Mohenjo-Daro, the silence doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like someone left the room and never came back. Let's get honest for a moment. You've walked these streets, touched the bricks, felt the silence press against your chest like a weighted blanket stitched by forgotten hands. And by now, one thing is clear. Nobody really knows what the hell happened here. Not the archaeologists. Not the scholars with their diagrams and carbon-dated pottery. Not the historians who write confident paragraphs built on foundations of maybe. Because this city is a masterpiece of ambiguity. And archaeology, for all its rituals and respectability, is still, at its core, guesswork. Educated? Yes. Well-funded. Sometimes. Romanticized? Always. You remember the first excavation reports. Men in pith helmets pulling soapstone seals from the ground like holy relics, declaring with wide-eyed certainty, this was the cradle of civilization. And then decades later, well, maybe not the cradle. Maybe more like a very tidy cousin. They've been trying to explain Mohenjo-Daro for over a century. Still, the conclusions wobble like a badly balanced artifact. Did the city fall to climate change? Maybe. To river migration? Plausible. To violence? Unlikely, but we found skeletons. To disease? No mass graves. No trauma marks. But who knows? Was there a central government? Possibly. Were they theocrats? They had no temples. Was there trade with Mesopotamia? We found their seals in Sumer. But maybe it was just a gift shop exchange. Did they have gods? Refer to the previous chapter and prepare to be politely disappointed. This city is like a riddle written in a language no one speaks, stored in a file someone misnamed, and buried under centuries of silt and sun and academic ego. You stroll past a collapsed wall. There's a sign here now. Modern. It says, Structure 17, possible administrative building. Possible. You have to love that word. It's the golden child of archaeology. A soft helmet for the head of fragile hypotheses. You pass another structure. Great granary. Hypothetical. Hypothetical. You begin to see the pattern. Every site is a question with a comma at the end. Every artifact, a poem with the final stanza torn out. Every certainty, a costume stitched together from fragments. A mannequin dress for a party that may have never happened. You find yourself standing in front of a series of neatly aligned rooms, once thought to be public baths, then latrines, then possibly artisan workshops. At one point, someone suggested they were schools. Sure, why not? No blackboards, no benches, no inscriptions. But imagination is a powerful tool, and archaeology wields it like a polite scalpel, cutting away uncertainty until it can be shaped into a story that makes the funding committee nod. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. It's just human, because we can't not tell stories. Even if the ruins don't speak, we'll make them talk. We'll name things that were never named. We'll assign purpose to what was perhaps just happenstance. A brick platform becomes a throne. A broken bowl becomes ritual. A drainage hole becomes proof of genius. You walk into another room, empty like all the others. Someone once said this was a meditation space. Another scholar claimed it was a storage closet. Maybe it was both. Maybe it was neither. Maybe it was just a room. And that's the hardest truth of all. Mohenjo-Daro doesn't owe us answers. It doesn't care about our theories. It didn't ask to be interpreted. It simply was a city of systems, of humans, of rhythm and ritual. And then a city of stillness. Archaeology is not a time machine. It's a mirror, one we hold up to the past and polish with our own reflections. And sometimes, when the ruins are particularly stubborn, all we see is ourselves. You step back into the sun. It's hot, blinding, relentless. The bricks beneath your feet are older than your country, your language, your gods. You look down at the dust swirling at your toes and think, this isn't a story. It's a question that refuses to be answered. A monument not to knowledge, but to not knowing. And that might be the most sacred thing here. It begins, as most endings do, with water. But not the kind that rages, not the kind that roars. This ending creeps. Slow. Invisible. The Indus River, lifeline, mother, spine of this ancient world, does not flood Mohenjo-Daro in a dramatic finale. It doesn't drown the city like Atlantis. It doesn't burst through walls or tear homes from their roots. No, it just leaves. Somewhere between the dust and the centuries, the river, the reason this city existed, migrated. Shift a course. Curve away, like a lover who no longer recognizes your voice. You wouldn't know it at first. The water still trickles through the drains. The wells still fill, shallow but stubborn. The bathhouses still glisten, faintly. But beneath it all, something begins to ache. You are standing now on the edge of what was once a bustling dock. Yes, a dock. Few realize it. But Mohenjo-Daro wasn't just landlocked elegance. It was a port. Flat-bottomed boats tied to the shore. Goods loaded under the eye of quiet officials. Children watching lotus flowers float beside jars of lapis and cotton. The Indus hugged this city once, cradled it. But rivers are not loyal. They wander, and sometime around 1900 BCE, it began to meander southward, or westward, or perhaps just away. You try to imagine what that felt like. At first, small things. The fish fewer, the baths slower to fill, the mornings a little too quiet, without the sound of water slapping wood hulls. Then the trade stalls begin to close. The merchant seals gather dust. The beads and shells and ivory begin to lose their shine. Because what is wealth when there's no current to carry it away? Some say the city had 100 wells, dug deep, wide, clever. And yet, not even the cleverest well can stop a river from forgetting you. And once the water withdraws, everything changes. Not suddenly, not with the drama we like to write about, but in silence. A house left empty because the crops failed. A neighborhood abandoned because the fields went brown. A bath unused because no one had time to be clean anymore. And it's not just a physical change, it's spiritual. Because rivers in the ancient world weren't just plumbing. They were presence. A god you could touch. A mother you could wash in. A voice that spoke without words. And when the Indus walked away from Mohenjo-Daro, it took more than water. It took purpose. It took rhythm. It took meaning. You sit now on a crumbling ledge, staring out at the parched earth where the river used to run. It's hard to imagine water here. Harder still to imagine a bustling port. But there are stories in the dust, if you listen closely. Stories of men with wet ankles and dreams of distant lands. Of women pouring water as an offering to something vast and ancient. Of children learning to swim before they could speak. All gone, not because they were punished, but because nature blinked. And that's the cruelest part. No epic disaster. No fire from heaven. Just a river deciding that it loved another bend more than it loved this one. You think about your own life now. About all the rivers you depended on. Routines, habits, people, and you wonder, what happens when they leave? Not in anger, not in malice, but simply because their path changed. Do we rebuild? Or do we crumble quietly, gracefully, like this city? You reach down and pick up a small stone. Smooth, water-worn, proof that the river once passed through here. That once cared. You hold it in your palm like a relic. And you listen, not for the water, but for the silence that followed it. Because that's the real story of Mohenjo-Daro. Not that it was destroyed, but that it was abandoned by the very thing that made it alive. And no one could stop it. Not the drains, not the gods, not even the people. They just watched. And then they left too, one by one, following the river, or the silence, or whatever was left. You crouch now, fingertips grazing the edge of a baked clay brick. It's cracked at the corner, faintly chipped, worn to a soft matte finish from the centuries of nothing pressing against it. You lift it slowly. It's heavier than you expect, not in mass, but in memory. Because this brick has held stories. Not written ones, not glorious ones, but lived ones. And it remembers them. Each indentation, a footprint. Each flake, a fragment of heat. Each mark, a breath long gone. No, bricks don't talk, but they do hold. They hold the weight of bodies, the echo of sandals, the scrape of pots, the tremble of laughter. They're the archive no library could preserve. And here, in Mohenjo-Daro, the bricks tell you everything that words refuse to. They tell you that someone placed this one here, intentionally aligned, measured part of whole. That it once fit inside something perfect. Not because it was beautiful, though it is, but because it was exact. These weren't casual constructions. The bricks of Mohenjo-Daro were fired with precision, measured to a ratio of 4 to 2 to 1. Length, width, height. Imagine that. A ratio repeated across thousands of homes. As if the people here weren't just building shelters. They were building order. One aligned brick at a time. But what happens when the city forgets why it was built? You walk now along a narrow street. The bricks beneath your feet shifting slightly, like they're tired of holding you. To your left, a wall, still standing. Its bricks interlock like a chorus, humming a tune only they remember. You press your hand against it. Warm, silent, alive in a way that wood and metal never are. And suddenly, you can feel them. The people, the brickmakers, hand-stained red from mud and ash. The masons, sunburned and proud, stacking purpose. The women brushing dust from thresholds. The children dragging their palms across the walls as they ran barefoot to nowhere. They lived in these bricks. And now, they're the bricks. Because the city didn't fall apart. Not in the way we think. It stayed. Even when the people left, the walls did not crumble. The streets did not vanish. The buildings did not collapse in a satisfying Hollywood crescendo. No, they just waited and aged and held their breath. You stop by a home that once belonged to someone important, perhaps a priest, perhaps a merchant. It doesn't matter. There's a small platform inside, maybe for sleeping, maybe for worship. There's a low ledge, perhaps for storing grain, perhaps not. You can't know for sure. No one can. But the bricks remember. They remember someone sitting here in the blue light of dawn, tracing their fingers along the wall as they waited for tea to boil. They remember the sound of a child coughing in the night. They remember the warmth of lovers, pressed close in winter, bodies curled like parentheses. And they remember the end. The day the footsteps stopped, the voices disappeared, the heat faded from the hearth. No violence, no catastrophe, just stillness. You think now about what you leave behind, about the bricks in your own life, the routines, the rooms, the quiet. Do they hold memory? Do they wait for your return? Or are they like these, silent witnesses to a time when life was lived with such precision, such care, and yet still, it disappeared? You place the brick back where you found it, not because it belongs to you, but because you belong to it. And as you walk away, you realize the people may have vanished, but the bricks never forgot. They hold the weight of every forgotten morning, every unspoken goodbye, every ordinary day that became, in hindsight, a final one. And in their silence, they whisper, "We were here. We mattered," even if no one remembers why. You are standing now in the heart of a city that spoke without writing, and that perhaps is its final and greatest rebellion. Because while Sumer carved laws into stone, while Egypt etched names into eternity, while China painted empires on a silk, Mohenjo-Daro whispered, not with words, but with walls, not with proclamations, but with plumbing, not with kings and conquest, but with quiet. And now, in this silence, you feel it, the ache of a civilization that left no scrolls, no histories, no long-winded odes to itself. Just systems, just shapes, just space. You walk down a narrow corridor, its bricks still tight, unmoved by the centuries. On the left, a raised platform, maybe a bed. On the right, a sunlit alcove, maybe a shrine. But there are no inscriptions, no dedications, no names carved into stone. No, I was here. No, this is mine. No ego, no pride, no memory encoded for posterity. Just function. And you can't help but wonder, what kind of people build a world so intricate and then refuse to name themselves in it? Perhaps they believed that what truly mattered could not be captured in words. Perhaps they knew that writing can distort, that once something is written, it becomes fixed, rigid, no longer fluid like life. Or maybe they did write. Maybe they had a script. After all, the indicials bear symbols, cryptic, beautiful, still undeciphered. But if this was a language, it died with them. And that is the wound, because writing is the wound we learn to love. It lets us cheat time. It lets us speak into the void. It lets us believe we are eternal. But here, in Mohenjo-Daro, there are no heroes, no poets, no philosophers, just people, their paths laid in brick, their choices encoded in symmetry, their lives washed clean again and again in communal baths that say more about who they were than any poem ever could. You pause by a small artifact museum, an open-air collection of what remains. Beads, shells, amulets, a tiny sculpture of a dancer with one hand on her hip, the other lifted mid-motion. She is grace in terracotta. She is confidence molded in a single breath. And she has no name. You stare at her for a long time. She's not Isis, not Inanna, not Aphrodite. She is no goddess, no myth, no mother of nations. She is just herself, made by someone's hands, to be held by someone else's. Made to be seen, maybe adored, maybe gifted. Made to be forgotten, and yet here she is. Not written, but not lost. Because that's the strange thing about civilizations. The ones that scream about themselves. The ones who write names on every wall. Who build pyramids for their kings. Who carve laws in blood are often remembered as grand. But the ones who remain mysterious. The ones who speak through order. Who breathe through structure. Who never name their dead. They become myths. You sit now on a low step, the dusk beginning to stretch shadows across the ruins. And you feel it again. The echo, not of words, but of rhythm. The echo of doors opening every morning to the same sun. Of meals cooked with the same spices, in the same corner of the same home. Of water poured from the same height, into the same clay vessel, day after day after day. That is the true language of Mohenjo-Daro. A language of repetition, of harmony, of not needing to say anything because everything was already understood. And in that silence, something profound was born. A civilization that may have been the first to realize. It is not the word that remembers. It is the life. And if you live it well, with care and balance and beauty, the bricks will remember for you. There's a kind of silence that is louder than sound. Not the silence of sleep. Not the silence of meditation. But the silence of ending. You walk now through the northern quarter of Mohenjo-Daro under the imagined weight of stars long since gone. The sun has set in your mind, even though it's mid-afternoon. Because this city lives best at night. In the dim hush. In the shadows where stories settle. You've wondered it before, but tonight you ask it properly. What did the last night of Mohenjo-Daro feel like? No historian knows. No text records it. But something inside you does. Let's pretend, just for a moment, that time is kind. That you can slip into it without creaking the door. It's quiet, not ominous, not dramatic, just quiet in a way that feels permanent. A clay lamp flickers inside a narrow home. The flame dances in a saucer of oil, casting shadows that stretch across the room like long, forgotten hands. A woman packs her woven basket. One garment, a pouch of lentils, a child's carved toy, smooth from years of small fingers. She moves slowly, not in panic, in resignation. There is no screaming in the streets, no soldiers pounding on doors, no smoke curling from rooftops, just the sound of decisions, A bowl placed upside down. A floor swept one final time. A glance at the doorway held a little too long. Outside, the city breathes its last breaths. Soft footsteps, the creak of wooden wheels, a cough from an old man whose lungs have long forgotten youth. There are no official announcements, no last rituals, only a knowing that has passed quietly from neighbor to neighbor. It's time, not because they know what's coming, but because what isn't coming has become unbearable. The river no longer sings in the distance. The grain stores are not as full. The trade has thinned to a whisper, and the silence, the one that always hung gently over this city, has begun to feel heavy. It presses now, not in violence, in emptiness. You imagine two lovers sitting on the rooftop of their home, sharing the last of the rice cakes. One leans back, points at the stars, but doesn't name them, because this city never needed names. Only rhythm, only time, and time is ended here. Down the road, a boy watches as his parents tie bundles to the ox cart. He doesn't understand yet. He asks if they'll be back soon. They don't answer, because how do you explain to a child that a city, a place that once worked, that once welcomed, that once held them like a bowl, has grown tired? How do you explain that no war has been lost, and yet it's over? Maybe somewhere near the Great Bath, a priest sits alone, his robes loose, his thoughts tangled. Maybe he lights incense, though there's no one left to smell it. Maybe he chants, though the words fall flat, because even the gods, it seems, have already left. You walk one last time through the main street, and you notice things you've missed before. A necklace left hanging in a doorway. A sandal dropped beside a well. A half-finished pot, its clay hardened in the shape of interruption. These aren't signs of panic. They're signs of surrender. This isn't a city running. This is a city letting go. And when the last family crosses the threshold, when the last torch is blown out, when the last footstep echoes into nothing, the city exhales, and the silence becomes complete. Not dead. Still, you stop now at the center of it all. The bath, the brick, the dust, and you feel it thick in your lungs. The grief of a place that was never meant to end with fire or conquest, but did, because even perfection is not immune to entropy, and because sometimes silence is not a curse. It's a burial, a soft one, a beautiful one, but a burial all the same. And in that silence, you say goodbye to a city that forgot how to speak, because it had said everything it ever needed to say, and how it lived. You bend down now and let your hand trail through the soil. It clings to your skin, not aggressively, not with force, but with the weight of recognition. As if this dust has been waiting for someone to remember it. Not just to study it, not to carbon date it, to remember. Because dust, you see, is not just what remains. It is what remembers. The ancient wind of sin sweeps gently across the ruins. It is warm, dry. It tastes like the inside of a forgotten jar. Clay, silence, a hint of burnt sesame. You close your eyes and breathe in. And suddenly, you're not in the present anymore. You are where time softens, where centuries fold like parchment, and memory seeps not from books, but from the earth beneath your feet. The dust remembers the softness of bear soles padding across a courtyard. It remembers the crack of terracotta when it slipped from someone's hand and shattered mid-laugh. It remembers the warmth of bodies pressed together in a dark room during monsoon. It remembers the final footstep, the final breath, the final pause, when silence was no longer ritual, but reality. You walk along the edge of the Great Bath once more. The dust gathers at the seams of the ancient bricks like wrinkles on the face of sleeping God. This place is no longer sacred in the official sense. It is not a temple, not a church, not a tomb, but it feels sacred, not because of what's built here, but because of what dissolved here. Dissolution is a kind of holiness, too. You wander deeper into the city, past alleyways where the sun no longer reaches, past homes that no longer know who lived in them, past wells that once touched the belly of the earth and now taste only air. Everywhere, the dust follows, in tiny whirlwinds, in the creases of your clothes, behind your ears, beneath your tongue. It gets inside you, not in a dirty way, in a remembering way, because the dust of Mohenjo-Daro is not ordinary, is not mere sediment, is biography. Each grain is a sentence of a story no one wrote. Each swirl in the wind is a question no one answered. Each layer is a decision, to build, to stay, to leave, to forget. You sit now on a low wall, the bricks warm beneath you. In the quiet, you begin to understand that this city's story was never meant to be told in monuments or scrolls or epics. It was meant to be felt here, on your skin, in the back of your throat, in the grit behind your eyes after hours in the sun. Mohenjo-Daro did not leave behind declarations. It left behind dust. And somehow, that's more honest. Because dust doesn't lie. It doesn't exaggerate. It doesn't worship. It doesn't dramatize. It simply remains. Soft, patient, everywhere. And now, as the wind kicks up again, you rise and walk slowly through the main avenue. The dust clings to your footprints, momentarily disturbed, then slowly, gently settling once again. As if to say, you were here, but not for long, because dust has a memory, but also has a rule. Everything becomes me, eventually. Every city, every body, every name, every monument. But if you listen carefully, if you stop trying to speak and instead, for once, allow yourself to be still, the dust will tell you what it remembers. And that memory is not tragedy. It is not loss. It is continuity. A city that once lived perfectly, then lived softly, then lived nowhere but here, in the dust, in you. And now, you're alone. Not alone in a modern sense, where solitude is padded with screens and playlists and softly glowing notifications. No, you are alone in the archaeological sense. Alone in a place that outlived its name. Alone in a city that no longer recognizes the language in your mouth, but still understands the weight of your silence. You sit, legs crossed, in the shadow of what might have been someone's kitchen, or workshop, or prayer room. The light is low now, sun slipping away, shadows lengthening like fingers stretching one last time before rest. You're not waiting for answers anymore. That's what this city does to you. It teaches you to stop asking, to listen not for meaning, but for stillness. You've walked the streets. You've touched the bricks. You've seen the ghost of water trails along the drain pipes, the smooth corners of homes, the mathematical poetry of a civilization that built without rulers. But now all that fades, because Mohenjo-Daro's final gift is not in what it tells you, it's in what it reflects back. You are not here to understand the city. You are here to be understood by it. And as you exhale into the fading warmth, you realize the silence is not passive, is not absence, is watching, not judgmentally, not curiously, but with a kind of ancient intimacy, like a grandmother who no longer needs to speak. She just knows, and you feel that knowing in the base of your spine. The silence of Mohenjo-Daro is not empty. It is heavy with recognition. It sees the parts of you that you've buried, the weariness behind your curiosity, the longing behind your research, the quiet ache that brought you here in the first place. Because nobody comes to a dead city by accident. We arrive at ruins when something inside us is already crumbling. You look around one last time. The structures are barely illuminated now, silver outlines against the dusky sky. The bricks have cooled. The air smells like sandstone and memory. And you realize you came here looking for them, but you found yourself. In their precision, you saw your chaos. In their silence, your noise. In their forgotten rituals, your daily grief. You understand now why they left no words. Because the truest things, the things that last thousands of years, cannot be written. They can only be felt. In bone, in dust, in silence. You stand up slowly. Dust clings to the folds of your clothes, as if the city is reluctant to let you go. You don't brush it off. You let it stay, and you walk away, not toward resolution or knowledge or truth, but toward peace, because the silence no longer frightens you. It knows you, and you, at last, know it. As you pass through the final arch, you turn back one last time, and you see it. Not a ruin, not a mystery, not even a city, but a presence. Still, enduring, alive in its own quiet way, watching you as you vanish into history,